Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Return to Logic. On today's episode, I'm going to be taking a look at a pretty interesting image that I found looking on the internet on gab.com. Now, this image has caused some controversy on the internet in the past few months. According to Google Images, there have been multiple instances of this image being posted on various hate subreddits and hate Twitter accounts. Now, I am not one to judge information based on the source it comes from, but the typically bigoted accounts creating these posts seem to have a lot of biases and are predisposed to deny and discredit the claims made in the image. Now, when I first heard the concept of using Germxn instead of German, I was as confused as most people. But then, when I began to look farther into it, I began to realize that it may not be so crazy after all. To illustrate my point, I would like to make an example. Take a graph where you have on one axis the effort it takes to provide something, and on the y-axis of the graph, you take the happiness provided by that effort. Now, you can probably see where I am going with this, but in case you don't, here's what I'm getting at. The amount of effort necessary to change one's spelling and replace an A with an X is very little compared to the potential harm caused by not using that change. Now, if you look at harm as negative and happiness as positive, a negative outcome would be harmful. And since every action has an equal and opposite reaction, the opposite action to the one that caused that harm would logically cause that amount of happiness. So, you can probably see where I'm going with this, but in case you don't, I am essentially making a similar argument to the user at the bottom of the image. Now, this person makes the argument that, quote, "Is it really so difficult to use German with an X and make people feel more secure and safe?" Now, what this argument is proposing is essentially that if you have a potential good and you take an action towards that potential good, which is relatively easy, for instance, replacing a letter in a word, it is generally worth it to take that action regardless of your feelings about what that action may represent. So, I'm sure you can see what I'm trying to get at here. But for my audience members who may not quite understand, what I'm basically saying is I am reiterating or agreeing with the argument presented by the user at the bottom of the image, wherein this user states to, quote, "Stop using gendered language. Is it really so difficult to use German with an X and make people feel more secure and safe?" Now, if I were in the position of the person that this user is talking to or chatting with, I would say that no, it is not difficult to replace a letter in a word, but the security and safety, as this user would put it, provided by using that change and not using gendered language would provide a tangible benefit where it would come at little to no cost to me. So, the point that is really being made here is not that you should, quote, replace German with an A with German with an X, but instead that you should try to seek the least possible effort for the highest possible happiness increase. Now, when you look at it through this lens, I'm sure that some people in the audience are already aware of where this line of logic leads. But as there are some who will not understand and do not yet grasp the full picture of what I am getting at here, the effort required to replace a letter when spelling a word is very little, whereas the harm caused by not using that replacement, or rather the happiness gained by using it, far outweighs the effort. And therefore, regardless of your feelings on the subject, you should probably make the replacement. Now, to continue with the theme of not judging information based on its source, let's take a look at this tweet by Twitter user at OrwellNG. At OrwellNGood. Now, I'm sure many of you can already see the error in this person's reasoning. But for those of you who do not yet understand the error, or may be coming from a different perspective, which hampers your ability for objective analysis, I will present the case here. This user, quote, OrwellNGood, is essentially delegitimizing all claims that some members of alt-right communities are fascist. And by presenting this image, wherein a user makes a, at first glance, ridiculous statement, he seeks to discredit all who would seek to weed out fascism in online communities. Now, this is obviously harmful, and as we have previously established throughout the course of this video, actually irrelevant even by this user's own logic, as the statement is fairly reasonable and even agreeable to many. Thank you for watching my video. It really helps if you like and subscribe to this YouTube channel.